Welcome to Taking Your Third Path, where courageous stories and hard-won wisdom guide us towards lives of intention, connection, and care.
Hi, everybody. On today's episode of Taking Your Third Path podcast, we're talking to Allison Daminger, a wonderful researcher who has been exploring the mental workload of family life. And on today's special Father's Day podcast, we'll be taking a deep dive into her research that will help dads and all caregivers create more recharge time. Whether you're a two-dad family, two-mom family, or a mom-dad family, this episode was made for you. So, Allison, what are some of these things that are pushing against couples getting to that place where they have their preferred work and family solution?
There are a number of sort of societal pressures or, cultural forces, whatever you want to call those big external things. And I think one of them is gender norms, gender socialization, right? A lot of couples that involve a man and a woman, they feel as though they each have these parts to play in the family. And sometimes the socially prescribed roles match really well with what, she and he want to do and are good at, right? And in those cases, like I say, great, Godspeed, you're one of the lucky ones who the template fits. But for my book, talked with a lot of couples where the sort of socially prescribed gender roles, she is kind of the household manager, he is the breadwinner and sort of outdoor maintenance provider, just didn't mesh well with their current work situations, their preferred ways of being, the things that they were good at. And I think those are the cases where couples get pretty stuck, is they're sort of like, this is not what I want, right? But this is what I saw my mom doing, or this is what I saw my dad doing. This is what I see all the other couples around me doing. And that brings up another, of these sort of social forces or social pressures is it's not just what we decide to do as individual couples, right? There are a lot of expectations that get put on us by our parents, right? Our child's teacher. For example, my husband and I, we have a 14-month-old daughter, and about a year ago, we were looking into childcare, and we wanted to have a nanny over the summer just to bridge us to daycare. And initially, we said, hey, my husband is going to be in charge of managing this nanny search. And quickly that fell apart because most of the candidates we were interviewing were young women who seemed to be much more comfortable interacting with me, right? And so that's just one small example of, okay, you can decide on an allocation of how you're going to map this out, and the other people you're interacting with might have different ideas. Another one I hear often from the parents that I've interviewed is we put dad first on the call list for school, and still they call mom first, right? And so these are sort of other people's templates for what a mom dad or husband wife household tends to look like that are going to get put on you, and that require some pushing back if you want to do something different. And then another social pressure is comes down to paid work, our occupations, right? So we don't have to go too far down this path, but the macro level data suggests that men tend to earn more than women for a whole bunch of reasons, right? The kinds of occupations that men tend to go into tend to be a little bit more financially lucrative, right? And there are plenty of exceptions, but that often means that when couples are thinking about these money time trade-offs, right, his paid work time is more important to the family's, financial bottom line, right? And so then it becomes hard to sort of go against these financial imperatives. So those are just a few. I could probably keep listing these all day long, but hopefully those examples are helpful.
Yeah, no, they're really great. I think another work one where that plays out is like it's although challenging for anyone to set limits at work, that probably it's even more challenging because of gender norms and assumptions around careers that a man would say, no, actually, I'm really going to stick to leaving at 5 or leaving at 3:30 or coming in at, whatever. Then a woman's being a good mother to set those limits. Yet if our focus today is about kind of creating recharge time, I think one of the biggest culprits is workplaces that are asking so much of us that in a two-parent household, both are coming home exhausted. Um, I'm wondering if some of these things play out differently in, you looked at queer couples. How is this similar or different in queer couples?
So I started this project way back in 2017 and initially was just looking at straight couples. I wanted to understand, when you have these two different genders, right, how does this play out? And when I talked about the research, people kept asking me, well, what about queer couples? What if you don't have a man and a woman in the relationship? And so toward the end of the research process for the book, I did a bunch of interviews with queer couples who had children, some female couples, some male couples, some with trans and non-binary members. And a few things stood out to me. Number one, I found that it wasn't that there was one partner who played the quote unquote woman role and the other partner played the quote unquote man role, right? It was more that these couples kind of mixed and matched in idiosyncratic ways, right? So the person who managed the childcare also managed the home maintenance, right? The person who managed the finances also managed the cleaning, for example, right? They sort of picked from these two, classic gender roles. And when I would ask them about, how did you come to this allocation? Why do you do things this way? They had some really, unique explanations, right? So I remember one couple who said, she's really focused on the present moment and the far future. And I tend to think in the medium range, right? Another couple said to me, well, he's just great with numbers, right? He's got this great memory for numbers. And I'm more of a space guy, right? I have this great spatial awareness, right? So he does our finances, I do the home decor. And so these were, things that were idiosyncratic to them, right? But that felt like, hey, we are able to get a really strong fit between who we are, what our work is like, what our interests, where our interests lie, and the way that we shape our time in the home. And the other thing that stood out to me about the queer couples I interviewed is that they talked with one another a lot more compared to the straight couples about their division of both physical housework and what's called the mental load, right? Who's kind of planning and remembering and thinking about stuff. And that didn't necessarily result in a 50-50 division, right? In fact, the majority of the queer couples I interviewed, one partner was doing more of the cognitive or mental work as well as more of the physical work. Um, but the queer couples were very aware of that dynamic in most cases, right? They would say, oh yeah, we've discussed it, right? It's working for us right now. If it stops working for one of us, we'll change it. And that stood out as really a strong contrast to what I heard from many of the straight couples I interviewed, where it often seemed as though the interview was the first time they had thought about these issues and we're like, oh, wait a minute. I guess we are kind of doing it in this imbalanced, gender traditional way. Like, what's that about? And so I think this willingness to among the queer couples to talk with each other outside the context of a fight, right? To have these more calm discussions about what are we doing and are we okay with it, seemed to result in a division of labor that even if it wasn't 50-50, that felt more satisfying for both partners in the relationship.
Yeah, it's making me think, for those who listen in, you're going to get to hear a couple of dads talk about this exact issue. And one of the funny moments in this conversation with them was I asked them if, some of this stuff played out in a gendered way. And one of the things was that the mom sometimes was more aware of clutter. And so they had to, think differently about things because the mom had raised the clutter issue. And I said, talk about idiosyncratic. In my family, I'm the one who can handle clutter and my husband can't handle clutter. So I think that you're saying so many important things here. One, that pay attention to your family, right? What's unique to you guys? What do you like to do? What play to your strengths? We've said this many times in for helping couples think about this stuff. And I also hear you say it's going to change over time, you know? And so the awareness that you are somewhere and doing something right now and that it could change and you can keep on talking about that is going to be really helpful for couples. Well, what were some of those things that you saw that helped couples do it better?
Yeah, well, I think the thing that you were just pointing to, right? This belief that they could change things, right? This sense of agency. It sounds very obvious and basic, right? Like, of course you could do something differently if you wanted to. But that was not the norm. I talked to, almost 200 people for this book, and the majority of them were kind of like, we're stuck with this particular division of labor. And for many of them, particularly when we're talking about the mental load, they felt stuck because they felt like this is part of our personality, right?
Mm.
They would say things like, well, she's just a type A person, and he's just a laid back guy. And so they felt like, well, you can't change your personality. This is who we are. Therefore, this is how we must divide things. And when I looked across the couples that I interviewed, I said, it doesn't make sense that I've talked to all of these type A women when we know that, in society, right, the personality differences between men and women are actually pretty small. There are some, right, but they're not women are type A and men are type B. And so I think that, one thing that couples can do is to say these things that feel ingrained in us as a matter of personality, just to question that and to say, are there other areas of my life where I am more relaxed, right? Or more type A? So, for example, sometimes when I'm talking to dads who are in the more traditional kind of, I'm focused on my paid work, right? And not as focused on home, I ask them, well, how do you manage your schedule on your job? Right? How do you keep track of deadlines and projects? And most of them, have developed systems that enable them to be productive at work, right? And I say, are there ways that you could pull those over into your home life, right? And when it comes to managing a calendar, thinking about, okay, here are the holidays that are coming up, here's the childcare schedule that's coming up, right? There are a lot of analogous cases between paid work and home that I think if we start to think about these as skills and systems that we can consciously develop, right? It's not to say that our personality and temperament is totally irrelevant, but I think that when you move to the skills framing and when you look at other experiences in your life where you have been able to call on those traits and systems, that opens up new possibilities, right? And so I think that switching from personality to skills and looking for parallels between what you do in your paid work and your home life is a really promising step for a lot of people.
Yeah, actually, you're reminding me of last month's conversation with Kate Mangino because I was talking to her about this concept of skills. And I loved, because you're right, because I'm a firm believer in skills, and I'll talk about that in a second. She said, maybe it's even starting one step before that of why you want to make the change. And she was talking about how, you know, if you're that person, if you happen to be the person in the family who is got so much energy in work and feeling a little bit burned out or burdened by having to be that primary provider and everybody's leaning on you to do that role, that she said, this is a chance for you to step back and say, hey, if I start investing in these relationships with my kids and my partner and my neighbors, and I have this other area of my life that I can really put more energy into, will it make a better life? You only have 18 summers with your kids. And so she was actually encouraging us to think about the why you would want to change. And I think that's a very provocative idea too, to really remember there's some benefits. And I think, again, when we talk to those dads later, you can see that when couples can think about this together, it really can help them create a life where they both feel so much more in partnership, no pun intended, in managing the moment in time and the future moments in time where they just feel happier from all this stuff. But to your skills point, we've really believed that there is a set of very teachable work-life integration skills, and that the skills you learn to integrate time for work and time for life are useful at work, and they're useful at home. prioritization, planning, all this kind of stuff. So I totally agree with you on the skills thing. Well, that's great. So learn some skills. Notice that you maybe have some skills that you're already using instead of kind of thinking it's about personality. I like that. What else have you seen couples do? I've heard you talk a little bit about this idea of getting on the same side of the table. Is that something you've seen?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that it can be hard, especially when, as many of the couples that I interviewed were, you're in the thick of raising kids, right? And some of them have elder care on top of that. They're also in their sort of prime, career building years. And so all of that hits. And I think that it's very easy to just sort of like focus on, okay, my partner is the obstacle, right? They're not doing enough, right? They're always at work. Why aren't they helping me? And the couples that I think can get out of that you versus me mindset, right? And more about, hey, what are the factors at play that are causing you to feel like you have to put in all these hours at work, right? What are the factors at play that are causing me to feel like I need to be really involved in the school PTA at this moment, right? And some of those are turn out to be, social pressures that we talked about earlier, right? I feel like I'm going to be judged if I'm not involved enough mom, right? Or I'm feeling a lot of pressure to be the financial provider. There's this really stressful thing happening at work, but I think if I push through it, I could get to that promotion stage, right? And so often when we get into these conflicts, right, it's about you have bad intentions. You're acting in bad faith. And so I think sometimes these get on the same side of the table moments help you strategize together, right? And recognize the bigger picture and see yourselves as teammates rather than adversaries, right? And that you can be creative about, okay, how do we think about the whole scope of our paid and unpaid work responsibilities? Where are your needs getting met? Where are my needs getting met? Are there ways that we could creatively, add in more recharge time for either or both of us? That just is, it's a different mindset, right?
Yes.
And tends to be a lot more effective than the sort of tit for tat arguments that usually end with one person feeling really defensive, right? And less motivated to do anything else, and the other person feeling aggrieved and frustrated. Those don't tend to be super productive.
Yeah, yeah. In our household, my husband and I always joke, it's all about communication, you know. And one of the things when I was talking to the dads, who you guys will hear discuss all this next, you know, there could be couples where they are at a stress point and they really need some help around communication. Like it's not going to be something they can kind of get to a better place by themselves. But I'll tell you, investing in getting some support, get good communication going, or if you're a couple that already can do communication, learn how to not get triggered, but instead be curious when you're talking to each other about, like you said, what are the factors that are, pushing us in the behaviors that are not helping us right now. If we can stay curious about it, um, it's really such a great lifetime skill set because it's not like you figure it out today and then it's all figured out forever. I mean, you're experiencing this yourself. It's like you have a kid that has certain needs at a certain point, and then later on, that those needs change, and how you solve the day or the week or the weekend or the year, because now they're in school and they have summers off. Everything keeps on changing. Or now you have elder care. So that idea that couples can keep on saying, okay, here's the latest of where we are. We had a solution. How do we get to the next solution? Is really great. Well, this is an episode that's talking about the importance of recharge time. Maybe you can even speak to your own life. Why is recharge time important for couples? And why is it important for both members of the family, if in a two-parent household, to have some recharge time? What have you been learning about that, either for yourself or when talking to other couples?
Yeah, well, the thing that comes up when I think about recharge and rest time is I gave a talk earlier this year about the book, and an audience member, a woman probably in her 40s, give or take, raised a hand afterward and said, why is it that on a weekend my husband can go down these rabbit holes, just following his interests, right? She talked about he wanted to share all these facts about poisonous snakes that he'd been learning because he was interested and, read all these articles about it. And she said, why don't I feel like I am entitled to rest, to pleasure, to, recharge, right? To use your language. And I think that there is something not necessarily, but often gendered, where particularly the women that I have interviewed feel like they need to get everything done before they've earned that recharge time. That definitely comes up among some men, but it's been less common in my research and my anecdotal experience, where they tend to have a little bit more comfort saying like, well, I'll get to those things later, but right now, this game is on, and so I'm going to sit here for an hour and watch it. And so I think part of it, regardless of where you fall in your relationship to rest, is just sort of recognizing it as something that doesn't need to be earned, that doesn't need to come after, all the to-do list items have been accomplished. This is something that I definitely struggle with, so I'm, giving advice that I need here, right? But I think that, many of us have been taught that working hard and being productive, right, is how we prove our value in the world. Um, Many of us feel, anxiety around, well, if this doesn't get done, what then? What then? What then? And I think that we need to take a longer term view, right? One of the things that's really helped me as a new mom is to say, I'm going to be more excited to hang out with my daughter. I'm going to be more engaged with her. I'm going to have more creative ideas about how we can play and interact if I have taken that time for myself. If I feel like I'm running on empty, then sure, maybe I will make sure she gets fed. I'll make sure she gets changed and put to bed. But that's not necessarily the version of me that I think is likely to be the best parent. Right. And so sometimes it's a bit of a mind trick. If you can't get yourself to just believe, I deserve rest, period, full stop, right? Sometimes it can help to say, in order to be the best parent, the best employee, the best partner, right? I need rest. And to be able to program that in, even if there's still 10 things that you didn't get to for the day.
Amen. Amen, sister. And I think you, if you don't mind sharing, you've just recently been through an example of how you kind of did this as a family system. And what I heard, and I'm hoping you'll share a little bit about this example, is that you were very intentional. You said, hey, there's this natural break. I've been doing X, then it's going to be Y over here. And as a family system, we can do something in between this change, this shift, and we can be very intentional about actually taking some time for ourselves. Tell us more about how did that feel for you? Do you think it's impacted your family system? Has it impacted your work in a good way or a bad way? I'm curious. How did taking that recharge time work out for you?
Yeah, so I'm a professor, and so we kind of follow the academic calendar, right? Classes finish up in early to mid-May, you get your grades in, and then you have a few months of summer before classes start up again. And I was burning the candle at both ends for a lot of the spring semester, and so I kind of said, I think I need a pause period, right? In order to sort of transition from this higher paced, higher output phase to the slower pace of summer. And when we were looking at the calendar, my husband and I realized there's several daycare day closures for holidays and in-services, right? And we're going to have to, cover those days anyway, right? Why don't we do something fun as a family during that time? And so what I did was I put together, about a little bit of time that was just me at home, right? And I'd spent a lot of time reading and napping and setting up a garden. But then the three of us, my husband and daughter and I, went on vacation and had adventures together, right? And that felt really cool and meaningful, right? My daughter's getting to an age where family travel doesn't just feel like a lot of work, right? It also feels like there's fun moments. And I think, just getting away, was really good for the three of us connecting in a way that wasn't just about logistics and okay, who's going where when and who's making sure that we have these groceries and who's done what laundry, but just like, no, what fun things do we want to do this afternoon? So that was great. And then the challenging part, right, is that in my work, and I imagine, many of your listeners have similar situations. There are just a lot of moving parts and a lot of people that I am accountable to and working with for different things. And so I would say the biggest challenge was kind of setting it up so that I left all of my collaborators in a good place, right? No one was depending on me for something that I then wouldn't get back to them for several weeks. So it did take a lot of forethought on the front end to really, message to people, hey, I'm going to be out of office, right? Let's get this done before I go so you can kind of work on it on your own time. For the most part, that went pretty well, but sometimes it feels like, oh, it's so hard to clear things out to take a break. Why bother doing it? But for me, at least, I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I agree. I think it does feel like sometimes it's hard, especially if we've had a really intense period of work before then. I've noticed for myself, if I'm coming off of a really intense period, getting that vacation is a little bit harder. If I'm coming out with more of a kind of normal amount of work as opposed to chronic overwork, the vacation is not quite so hard. Either way, I think you come back. I'm imagining you had something. We don't have to talk about it because we're probably running out of time. But like I'm guessing, certainly when I come back from vacations, I'm more equipped to handle the family side of things, but I also have had some creative ideas on the work side of things just because I've stepped away from it all for a little bit. It's really interesting how both sides of my mind benefit from having a break. So
Absolutely. Yeah. For me, it was really about what are the priorities?
yes.
I think sometimes I get caught up in the like day to day, okay, I'm responding to these messages and moving these things forward. And coming back, I was like, wait a minute. I don't know that all of these things are really moving me toward my objectives. And so that distance was really helpful for that.
Oh, I've heard a lot of people talk about that, and it's actually really a really good point about what's even a even a day away can help us think this way, and certainly a vacation can help us think this way. So wonderful. All right, well, when you're thinking about parents and how they're, trying to make this all work, you have some great information in your book. Again, it's What's on Her Mind: The Mental Workload of Family Life. And what's one last piece of advice that you would have for couples as they're thinking about how to keep on reaching for their preferred approach to work and family that also includes some recharge time?
Yeah. I think calling back to some of the conversations from earlier in the episode, I think that having a conversation, setting aside, 30 minutes, maybe even 15 minutes at some point after the kids are in bed or whenever, to just say, hey, how are things going? Right? How do we feel like our division of labor is, right? And my big thing is it's not just the division of tasks, but it's the division of sort of project management and oversight of those tasks, right? That is a lot of work in its own right. And I think that's the piece that many couples miss when they're, figuring out who's going to do what. So really sitting down and saying, hey, how does each person feel about our division of the physical tasks, our division of the mental load, our recharge time and time for, our relationship, right? And inevitably people come up with, things that are good and things that are suboptimal, right? And then can you start small, right? Don't try and overhaul your entire family life overnight, but can you pick a thing that is, hey, I haven't been able to exercise. And I feel like that's a really important part of my mental health maintenance, right? Could you watch the kids from X to Y 2 days a week, right? Or what would work for you, right? And so you can identify a couple of concrete things that'll move you a little bit closer to that ideal. I think if you can do that, not in the heat of the moment, but in a spirit of let's check in and let's collaborate and brainstorm together. I think you can, get a lot done that way.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hey, and if you're listening in, stay tuned for the next section because what I've done is try to show you how we sometimes think this is all about gender, and gender does play a huge role, as we can see from Allison's book. But we're going to be talking to two dads who were the primary flexors in their family. And so we're going to turn things around and think about, is this about roles? one parent's a little overwhelmed by their life, the caregiving role they have, and another by their work role, and how do they both communicate to get to a better middle ground where they're both more satisfied with both their work, life, and recharge time. So thank you, Allison. What a great time to have you here, and stay tuned for the next section of Taking Your Third Path. So welcome again to segment 2 of Taking Your Third Path. We've been talking to Allison Daminger, and I just want to say one more quote about something that she said, that the most contented couples were those who perceived a match between themselves and their circumstances, and their ability to shape and reshape the cognitive labor if need be. So I hope what we've been getting across is that, if families want to have time for work and family and recharge time, that really the goal is to get them both on, in a two-parent household, both parents on the same side of the table. And that when you do that, you will have a wider range of options around how you solve work and family. And that you're going to actually both be able to work together to think about how to create recharge time. And so I've invited a couple of dads, and I purposely picked dads because I wanted to show that this is not so much about gender. This is really, if you want to have more recharge time in your life, it's about roles. Who's doing work? Who's doing family? How are you working together to create recharge time? And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Austin's story in a second, and then we're going to hear about David's story. And then I'm going to ask Austin to illustrate a couple things. So Austin was a stay-at-home dad for a while. And then I do think he had some, flexible work that was happening around that. But then they moved to a new solution where both parents were working full-time. And now they've flipped again. And Austin's the parent who's working, and Mary is taking some time to re-explore where she wants to go next with her career. And so this is a family that's really made a lot of changes around how they solve work and family. And one of the things we've really learned about is, communication is key if you want to solve this. And so part of helping couples think about how to get to recharge time is helping couples pay attention to what have they learned around what helps them communicate better. So Austin, you've been through many different work-family models. What have you and Mary learned around how to communicate and what helps you communicate better?
It's definitely something we've been together 20-ish years. So it's a long lesson to learn, but there's a big part of our early relationship where we were kind of like, this is the way we dealt with problems. And so we both kind of felt like that was just the best way to do it. So Mary would always kind of like if we had conflict, Mary would need time to like organize her thoughts and then kind of figure out what she was feeling and then be able to like come down and discuss that and with organized thought behind it. And during that time, while she was doing that, I was off and my brain was kind of like the Tasmanian devil, where like this small thing now started to spiral. And what was like just some frustration became like just outright anger. And if it festered too long, it grew and grew. And several years ago, we were in a situation where there was conflict, and I could see her kind of bristling about an issue. It wasn't something she was upset with me about. I could just tell she was upset. And I remember just prompting her, like, just tell me what you're feeling. Like, you don't need to organize it. Just tell me what it is you're feeling. You don't need to say why. Like, just let me know what it is. And it was, maybe a 20-minute car ride. And by the time we got home, we were both blown away at just how quickly and easily we were able to like understand what she was feeling, understand why, organize it together, and deal with it. It wasn't an adversarial kind of conflict. It was more so like, you aren't feeling great. Let me see if I can help you with that. Let's like just put it raw out in the open. And we've been, practicing that more and more to the point where like I feel like that has now become our just operating model for when it comes to dealing with conflict and strong emotions. Is like we don't need to justify why we feel. We just understand that this is what we feel in the moment. And, even over the weekend, we were dealing with some stuff with the kids and we went to bed and I was upset about something. And I remember just sitting up and just being like, hey, I need to tell you what I'm feeling because I'm afraid if I sit here, it's just going to get worse. And I just started, blurting out this just like word vomit of emotion. And in the midst of that, we could kind of discuss through it and just kind of pick it apart piece by piece as it was coming out and not wait until it became a problem.
Yeah.
Um, and it's always been like I wish we'd learned that, when we were together in our 20s. Like, I don't know why it took, we're almost 40 before we figured that one out. It feels like it would have been a lot easier earlier on, but that has been like I think the biggest thing for us when it comes to communication is what we've learned.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I think what I really, when I was hearing Austin talk about this, it's funny. I think there's other couples where what's not happening is they're not being triggered by each other's expression of their feelings. They're curious. They're just listening to each other and then finding some answers. And for some other couples that might not work, but the most important message is you guys kept on saying, hey, communication is important. Let's figure out a way that really works for us. And you really mastered an approach that's really working well for you because life keeps on throwing new curveballs, and therefore you need to keep on figuring out how to handle those curveballs. Thank you, Austin. That's awesome. I want to really briefly tell you David's story because David and Liz have had a kind of a similar work family model since their children were young, where David was the primary parent and Liz was the working parent. But what was fun when David and I were talking about this is, I think very stereotypically, a lot of women will really recognize what David's been wrestling with over the last few years, which is as the kids got older and they went to two different schools and two different schedules and just a lot more complex of mental load of managing life with two school-age kids, that David was noticing that he was hitting that maximum capacity of life demands, and that maybe he needed to make a shift to allow for some more space in his life. And so, David, when you and I were talking, there was a change. You were noticing a lot more going on. And what happened? How did you and Liz start talking about that to make some changes?
Yeah, I think just the amount of mental load work that is involved being the primary parent for two small children is vastly different from two in two different school districts, one with special needs, everything that goes on with that. And I was, yeah, just getting overwhelmed with that. And there was a time when I missed something in my youngest daughter's school email, and she was very upset that she went to school and didn't know about this event. And so, like Austin, I just had to say, like, I need you to read this one email from the school. Like, Liz, I need you to read this one email. And just honestly, just saying that took so much weight off my mind. Just having that out in the open. And there was also on Liz's side, there's a certain amount of kind of gatekeeping too, where she was concerned that she couldn't do, she doesn't have as she doesn't have as much attention to detail as I do in a lot of things. And so she was worried that she wouldn't read the email as well as I would. But when I brought it up, that the problem wasn't that she wouldn't do it as well as I would, it was I wasn't doing it as well as I would. And that was a problem. And it wasn't that, she was failing me, it was that I was failing our daughter. And that is the new rubric of what how well you need to do. And it's not about whether or not you're going to disappoint me, it's whether or not you're going to disappoint her. And I'm disappointing her, so I need help with this.
And what's so great about that, again, it's about communication, right? So you were able to speak up and say, I'm maxed out. There's a lot going on and I need some support. And then you and Liz could kind of figure out a way to talk about it and say, hey, you're right. This is the new answer we need. At this stage of our lives, even as the primary parent, I need to step in and help out with this part of the life side of things. You also said something else that I thought was just so relevant to so many couples, that sometimes one of you would feel a little resentment around the other's recharge time. Tell me more about what was going on there and what did you observe?
I think that's actually how I started working in the first place for Third Path was she was starting to feel some resentment. This is coming out of the pandemic. Both our kids are finally going back into school, and frankly, I needed a lot of recharge time from being at home with two small children during a pandemic. And I took that, but then there was a point where they're both in school and I'm not doing as much. I need to find something to do with my days because she was starting to get resentful of me having that time. But I think whoever is the more stressed parent at any given time can start to feel resentful of any perceived recharge time. When I was feeling overloaded with mental load capacity, and I was sitting on my computer doing work during the day, and she wasn't as stressed at work and come down and work on a puzzle, I would start feeling resentful of that. And I'm sure she's felt resentful anytime that she's been overworked and stressed at work.
Yeah. Oh, what a great example that, it is this whole idea. Again, there's these three buckets we're trying to meet as a family system. We need to have income and we need to take care of life, and we both need some recharge time. And as a family system, we probably need some recharge time. And what I'm hearing is that you guys have gotten good at kind of asking for what you need to make it work better. And you've recognized that, there's going to be this kind of ebb and flow, and how to keep on changing how you solve it, given the changes that are going on around too much work, too much life. Wow, great examples of how to get on the same side of the table and think together about how we as a family system can solve these needs for recharge time. Austin, I wanted to ask you, so we have this concept that when you want more recharge time, there's kind of these basic things you have to do, like, take care of the kids, get work done, have some sleep, hopefully. And you have to have enough time after doing all those basic things to still have time and energy to think about, hey, what would be fun for us to do? Me as a person, us as a couple. All right. How did you get there? How did you start mapping out those fun things? What helped you start? What did you claim as your fun things, and how did you make it happen?
I think the easiest is just finding the things that have the least amount of friction, either building that into a system or like just making it as a default something you can do. So, we set aside on our kind of like weekly schedule. We always want to have one night that's like just for me and Mary, and one night just for the kids. So we look at Friday and Saturday as those nights to do that. We, you know, back over winter, we were looking for something, a gift for some friends, and then we found and kind of stumbled our way into finding like mini pass season tickets to the local like Durham Bulls, which is our local mini, or not mini, minor league baseball team, which is awesome. And it essentially is a game per series we get tickets to go to, and it's usually Friday or Saturday. And so we, eventually, we're looking for just a single game gift for some friends, turned into the season passes, and now we have 2 nights a month scheduled with the family and some family friends to go to a Bulls game. And then the other nights, when it's just me and her, we kind of have like a grab bag of activities we can do. If it's just us, it's always easy to just go out and get dinner, just the two of us. I think a lot of times on Thursday, what we do is we just text our friend circle and be like, hey, we've got an open Saturday night. Anybody want to get together? That might just mean hanging out at a friend's house, and just catching up without the kids around. Or it might mean we all go to a concert or a show just because we can get last minute tickets. Um, there's, always nights too where like it's just us and the kids, and a movie night is an easy thing for us to do because we've got a backlog of movies we all want to watch. And take out a movie and some popcorn is a really easy way for the whole family to connect and recharge together.
Hmm. Wonderful. Well, I love that idea that you're really thinking intentionally about some of it's just you and Mary, some of it's with the whole family, and also how you figured out how to bring friends into that solution too, is quite remarkable. So yay for you guys. David, I know that you also have created some really wonderful ways to create recharge time for yourself, for your family system. Tell us a little bit about that, and make sure you talk a little bit about the role music and choral has played in your life too.
Yeah, for sure. I was getting burnt out a couple years ago in December around some things, and I decided I needed something that was just for me, just that was not volunteer work with the PTA, that was not, doing something with the kids, something that just brought me joy. And I decided I wanted to get back into singing. And I looked around, and there was an audition for the San Diego Master Chorale, and I happened to stumble upon it at the right time where I auditioned then in February and I got accepted, and I've been doing that for the last 2 years. And it's like 4 concerts a year, rehearsals on Monday nights when I didn't have anything else planned anyway. And I always come back from that, even though it's a 2.5 hour rehearsal, it's kind of stressful. I just came back recharged and feeling good. And I enjoyed that. And then, like Austin, another thing that we do as a family, after the pandemic, again, we got season tickets to the Broadway series locally. And we have 4 tickets, and some shows are good for families and some aren't. And so when we take the kids, it's a family time, it's a Sunday afternoon. And when they don't want to go, when they're not interested, then we have 2 free tickets, and we can just call random friends and have a, kind of a double date situation. And that's a lot of fun.
Mm.
And then on top of that, there's 2 much smaller theaters that are much more recently priced that we just have 2 tickets to. And that builds in kind of date nights throughout the year that we don't have to worry about and don't have to plan. And we just know that, okay, last night we went to the Hoya Playhouse and saw a new play, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great. It's actually, you're like my inside scoop on what good plays are out there too. So it's been really fun to learn about that together. Well, that's great. Now, I know that there's somebody listening in. There's a mom out there listening in saying, "Yeah, but who organized all this? Was it Liz who organized all these plays and stuff like that? Was it Mary?" So, tell me, has recharge time unduly landed on the mom in these family systems? David, what's your thoughts on that? And then I want to hear from Austin.
No, not at all, really. The chorusing was all me, of course, and uh the season tickets were mostly me. The ones to La Jolla Playhouse started because we were looking for something for me to do for my birthday, and I think I had to plan my birthday as I often do. But that was something that I think Liz suggested, and I was like, yeah, that sounds fun. And then from there we started getting season tickets to that uh theater too.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm guessing, Austin, you might have a similar story that when you get two parents on the same side of the table thinking about we want work, we want family, we want recharge time, that even the act of, figuring out recharge time becomes a mutual activity. Is that the case in your house, Austin?
Yeah, it's mutual in the sense that we both, I think, have an equal share in how we make that happen. But I think where we each kind of take our own ownership is like what we do. The season tickets to the Durham Bulls, that was something the two of us stumbled on together, literally on the couch next to each other. Like, so like we both get to claim that as a win. And then, there's concerts that we like to go to with the kids. And a lot of times Mary's the one booking that. Mary likes to travel. I think, her new change in life has afforded her a lot more opportunity to travel. And so she is taking the bull by the horns on that one and planning trips for her, for the kids, for the family. In fact, she's about to disappear tomorrow to Cancun with some friends for some recharge time for herself, but she likes to do that. And so she's able to kind of make that a function of the family. And then when it comes to the social piece, that's always been, for some reason, just to me. I'm the one that gets the social itch before she does. And so I'm the one on Thursday that looks at the calendar and goes like, oh man, we have nothing to do Saturday night. Let's text our buddies and see what they're up to. And we've invited ourselves onto a double date, to go to dinner with friends because they were, hey, we'd love to see you guys. We've got reservations. We can make it from 2 to 4. And it was usually me that kind of set it up. And so Saturday afternoon, I'm like, by the way, we're having dinner with JB and Corinne tonight. So like she's, give her enough time to shower and do her hair and she's good to go. So I
That's
think a
great.
lot of that's just like who gets the itch first and then finds the open date.
Yeah. Yeah, well, again, because you're both family systems where you said, work, family, and time for recharge, I think it just creates more spaciousness for people to claim some fun things to do. All right, so this is our Father's Day special, and we are encouraging dads and people of all genders to create more recharge time. And I'm wondering, if we think for a second, what advice do you have for other fathers around the importance of creating some recharge time?
I trying to form this one because like I started off with with one idea and then I had like the spark of a better one. But I think the crux of it is like recharge time, especially as a parent, is a it's not a nice to have or a want. It is a need. And I think addressing it as such, um, I know when I talk to friends about like what I do to recharge, it's like, oh, I play video games. I love to play. Like I log off at 5 o'clock, play video games. But that's not like I think the kind of need that fills. Instead, like in the mornings, I've now started to like build into my routine a workout time. And it's taken me years to kind of get to a point where I realized like going to the gym and working out is such a critical part of my just mental health as well as my physical health. In my 20s, I was going to the gym for vanity reasons. Now I'm just trying not to get fatter and I'm trying not to let my cholesterol get out of control. I'd like to live long enough to see grandchildren, which I don't want to have anytime soon. But I also want to be able to like get through the day without, losing my temper or feeling like I'm overworked or overstressed. And so learning more and more about how physical health plays such a big role in that and how exercise in of itself is just such a critical piece of that. And so starting to structure my, routine to allow for like an hour a day for me to go for most days to go to the gym and, you know, walk on the treadmill, lift some weights, do the things that are more of a meditative workout than an actual like physical exertion. And then it feels great when you go home and like all of a sudden I can't bend over to pick something off the floor because my muscles were worked out. And I feel like, oh, I actually did something really cool for my body, but also like this is more so just for myself.
Yeah.
And seeing how necessary that is, it's really easy to get, Mary involved and making sure that she sees that I need to make time for this and that she can arrange what she needs so that that happens.
Yeah.
So, I drop
That's
off my oldest to school. She drops off my youngest just so I don't have to come back and do that task.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and what I really am taking away from your story is everybody's going to define what is recharging differently. Something might become more important over time that wasn't as important. But that even those things you were talking about, that time together with just Mary, that time together with friends, that time together as a family system, all of those moments are things where it kind of replenishes our cup and we have a little bit more relaxed spaciousness to deal with stress and challenges that come our way. So yes, exercise is playing a role for you, but I would bet those times you hang out with just Mary or friends or just some family time, all of that helps us in our well-being and better manage, the stresses of life that come our way. So wonderful. Thank you for those great examples. How about you, David, when you think about it, there's so many ways you could answer this, and I'm looking forward to whatever answer you come up with, but I'm thinking about that story you told where, you needed some time for yourself and you took on chorus. And so there might be another story that comes to mind, but what advice do you have for dads?
I think that's it. I think just what you were saying is knowing what kind of recharge time you need in the moment. When I was a full-time at-home dad, honestly, my recharge time was my wife would take the kids one Saturday, and take them away. And 90% of the time I would drive for Lyft. Like my recharge time was making some extra money and talking to adults. When I got, stressed in other ways, my recharge time is going to course. It's still work in a way, but it's recharging for me. Sometimes the recharge time is having regular date nights, or sometimes it is, Liz just taking the kids away for a day and sitting on the couch and, binging some movies because that's the way I recharge a lot too. So yeah, just knowing what you need in the moment and also looking for times of resentment, either directed towards you or when you're starting to feel it. And making sure that everybody in the relationship is getting adequate recharge time or feeling that they are.
Wow, I couldn't have said it better myself. So thank you for being role models on dads who have claimed recharge time and showing us how, yes, it's good for you, but it really creates a really healthy family system and a strong relationship with your partner too. So great job, guys. Hey, hi again. For those of you who are looking for some important takeaways from this month's Father's Day celebration podcast about how dads and all caregivers can create recharge time, Melissa and I are going to do that right now. Our guests were Allison Daminger and two amazing dads, David Rogers and Austin Dowd. So, Melissa, let's start with some basics. What are some things we've learned about how do you take recharge time? What do we need to learn?
Well, I really enjoyed hearing all three of our guests. They really brought such great insight. And I was initially reminded about different types of recharge time. There's time you take as a family, there's time you take as a couple, and there's time you take for yourself. So I think right away we go from this being super simple to we just need some time to recharge our battery. We have to start right away with what are we trying to define? What kind of time are you trying to make? That's a big basic.
Yeah, yeah, that absolutely is. And what when you think about, what else were they mentioning? I mean, I think, for example, that, it's a skill set. What are they talking about that it's a skill set to do recharge time?
Yeah, I mean, word that it was easy to just say, I'm going to take a break now. There's so many aspects that go into actually being able to do recharge time. So I'm specifically thinking of David going to sing with the San Diego Master Chorale, that as the primary caregiver in the family, he has this obligation, or I think it's probably easiest, I'm putting words in his mouth, but I think it's probably easiest for David to actually go and engage in that activity once logistics are put into place, so he can delegate what needs to happen while he's gone. He has figured out the schedule to be sure that's happening at a time where he can go and really separate himself. There are pieces that go into things that we do that help us to integrate work and life that are skills, the delegation, time management. I would venture to say there's probably some creative use of technology in being able to make all that happen, but these are skills that we use so that we can actually make recharge time happen.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting that you think about David because I think about Allison and her comment of wanting to come home and having enough energy for her kids. And so, to me, the battle's always been about how do you put some limits around work so that I have enough energy when I come home. And I loved her point that, there's a lot of pressure out there to do more and have less recharge time. But she said, hey, think about it as it's not, us, it's us, not us against each other. It's us against the system. So getting on the same side of the table and saying, hey, what what do we want our work, family, and recharge time to look like? And how can we both work together to make that happen? Um, there's something about staying curious that's going to help us get to more recharge time. What did you hear around, the importance of being curious to get to good answers?
Well, I think that point that you just raised is the beginning of it, staying curious, asking the questions, how do we come up with this recharge time in partnership so that it's not coming from a place where you're in resentment, but that curiosity to hear, oh gosh, partner, you don't have what you need right now, please tell me more about that, instead of, you don't have what you need right now, well, let me tell you about all the ways I don't have what I need right now. So how do we stay curious? And I think staying curious leaves us open to a lot of different possibilities and solutions.
Yeah, yeah. I also heard them talk about, um, you need to get curious about what's right for you. And that's some work you can do, like, oh, I am feeling resentful. Am I feeling resentful because there's too much life I'm taking on? Is it too much work I'm taking on? And then, I heard a little bit of, I hope what everybody, the listeners heard is that this isn't so much about gender, that, basically the primary parent can feel resentful sometimes, the primary worker can feel resentful sometimes. And, instead it's like, let's work together about how to approach work, how to approach family, how to approach recharge time. But maybe there was one gendered thing. I'm curious if you heard this too, that maybe women have a little bit of a hard time kind of just to say, I have the right to actually take some recharge time. Is that something that you see, or maybe you saw something different?
No, I think I heard the same thing you did. And then I got really curious about whether it had to do with whether that was gendered or whether that was role specific. But I'd be really curious to know, as people are kind of processing this and downloading all of this, what is your thought about whether the that notion, like, stuck with me so hard, that the time has to be earned. I can't take my recharge time yet because I didn't earn it. How much of that really is something that a woman would say versus just the primary
The primary
caregiver at
parent.
home?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'm also, so we have some basics, that,
Hmm.
you have to really think about that there's these different buckets, my time, our time as a couple, if we are partnered, our time as a family system, and some beautiful solutions about how people did that. But, we also learned listening to them was how different recharge time can be for different people. What were some of your takeaways around that?
Well, I loved that some of them were really active and some of them were more passive and some of them were solo and some of them were with groups. Hearing about, hearing Austin talk about that some of his recharge time was in working out and some of it is just hanging out, him and his wife hanging out with their friends. I just love the sort of the juxtaposition of that the different types of recharge are so important. And I think it's, what do you need now? It's so personal and it's so life circumstance specific too.
Yeah, yeah, there was such a great example where I loved David talking about, you know, getting out with a baby and having some time to play with other parents with their kids felt kind of easier than coordinating the life with two school age kids and all the mental load he was talking about. And so, no surprise, singing in a chorus with adults becomes this really wonderful thing. In fact, I'm remembering now that he talked about how he would be an Uber driver when it was as a way to get away from some of that the baby stuff and have some adult conversation. So really paying attention to what's going to feel good to you, and what feels good to you might change over time. There also was some tips around, how to initiate it and who gets involved with getting it started or getting it organized. What were some things that you learned around just getting it into the books?
Well, as I was listening to Austin and David talking about we have a season pass, we have a subscription. Like, when you plan something far enough out and you know it's going to happen, you're going to hold that time more sacredly than, oh gosh, it's Friday. We're supposed to hang out tomorrow night and it's supposed to be like quiet time. And what do we do with this? That there's something so beautiful about time that's already on the books, easier to hold that time. And then it sounded like traditions also kind of played into that too. Like, it's my birthday and these are the things I like to do for my birthday. This is we do date night once a month. This is how we do date night. So
Yeah,
those
yeah.
those, those stood out for me.
Yes, and I can see that in my own household. Jeff, we've learned that we like going to the theater, so Jeffrey's now become the person who gets the season tickets. And I like to make sure we are seeing friends now. As an empty nester, we have more time to do that. And so I have this little list that I go through and I try to make sure we're organizing something ahead of time, which speaks to that whole idea that each of you might have different strengths that you bring to organizing it, or maybe different things that excite you, and to kind of lean into those differences. And that will help you get it into the books as well. So, well, cool. Hey, so we hope as you're listening in today that you're getting great ideas about how recharge time is possible, especially if you're in a couple, if you work together to think about how to get on the same side of the table and say, how do we both reach for this together, and stay curious in those conversations. I guess as a last thought, how I'm thinking about how recharge time changed so much for me over the life cycle. So I want to give you a couple of examples, and I'm curious if you had some examples as well. Because I think as listeners, it's good to know that where you are today isn't where you are forever. And so, for example, we were joking that both Melissa and I have a little bit of a shared truth, which is For me, on Mother's Day, my favorite gift on Mother's Day was not to hang out with my kids. Secrets out. But like that was actually for when my kids were little, that was a good break to not have to think about them. And that was a real gift for me. On the other hand, some of my funnest recharge time when the kids were little was I remember picking them up after school and playing TV tag with my son and his friends in the playground. And just like it was such a great mental shift from like I'd been thinking all week long, and now I was physically running around and laughing. And that felt really good. But, as I mentioned, kids grow up, things change. And so it does change. And I have now found out that I have lots of time to see friends, which I just didn't feel like I had time to see friends before. And so the idea that we can every week see a couple of friends and plan for that just feels kind of amazing. So how about you? What are some of these different stages? You still got young ones at home, so maybe you're not even at a different stage.
I'm not in a different stage. I'm stalled out in my stage, and that's okay. That's all right. I think for us right now, it looks like grabbing time where we can, and I think that, and I don't know. I guess while I think this idea of having standing time for yourself is very important, I also think there's just making the most of the moment. And I think there's something about knowing yourself, like we talked about, and knowing what actually does fill your cup. You can kind of grab the moments where they are. So one example is Brian and I will often, not often, when we realize that we have not connected in a while, we will take the time to have the kids eat before us. And then instead of eating in our kitchen, we go to a different room, we light a candle, we sit with a glass of wine, we pretend that we're actually out when we're in our home, and we can make the most of it. But it's funny when you're talking about how what a great gift it is on Mother's Day to be able to be on your own on Mother's Day instead of with your kids. I do think there are loads of times for me where recharge is separate from my kids. And I'm also acutely aware of the fact that my daughter is about to turn 8. My time is limited with somebody who actually is the right size to cuddle, like to fit in my lap and cuddle. And so when I can put myself in the right frame of mind for it, and she's in that moment too, like sometimes the greatest recharge is just that beautiful connection that I can get with this other person, knowing that the way it works right now is rather fleeting.
Mm-hmm. What I take away from your insights, which I think many parents can relate to, is we can enjoy the huggle, the huggle,
We call
the
it too.
cuddle. We can enjoy the cuddle more because we've actually taken some time for ourselves and time as a couple. And so it's all three of those ingredients really help the other part feel even more enjoyable. Wonderful. I couldn't agree with you more. So look, we're at the end of this wonderful podcast. And if you're looking for some more resources on this great topic, you should check out this month's blog post and the free resources page on our website, because we've got a bunch of great resources there as well. Thanks again for listening, and keep taking your third path.